Hey everybody, this is Brad Brown, and I had an idea for an object lesson I wanted to share with you. There are a lot of people who argue that the Bible simply isn't reliable. They say that it's been copied and translated so many times that there's just no way to know that what we have today matches what was in the original. But the truth is, the evidence for the reliability of Scripture is simply overwhelming. Not only is it reasonable to believe that our Bible matches the original, once you've seen the evidence, it's really pretty irrational to believe otherwise. So I was brainstorming, trying to find a way that I could get just a little piece of this evidence and put it in a way that kids could understand so they would know that there are reasons behind what they believe. So that when somebody comes across their path who has an argument like you can't believe the Bible, they'll have reasons why they can hold on to their faith. So here's what I came up with. I want to explain just a couple of the criteria that are used for measuring the accuracy of ancient manuscripts. Because it's not really a question of faith, it's a question of scholarship. You know, scholars all the time come across old manuscripts, and there's criteria they use to determine how reliable those are. So what would happen if we took that same criteria and applied it to the Bible? Well, usually we don't have, in fact we almost never have, the original ancient document. What we have is a copy made sometime later. So when measuring the reliability, there are two main things that are looked at, two most important things. Number one is how many copies do we have, because obviously the more copies we have, the more we can assume that it's reliable. And the second is the amount of time that passed between when it was written and the oldest copy we have. So let's look at a couple of manuscripts. Now, Plato was a philosopher, a Greek philosopher. He wrote, well, a lot of stuff. And we have 7 copies of manuscripts of things that he wrote. So to illustrate that, I have 7 pinto beans. Now, I've never heard anybody argue that we can't know what Plato wrote. So apparently, if we have 7 copies, that's enough. And the oldest copy was about 1,200 years after Plato wrote it. So apparently 7 copies, 1,200 years later, is good enough to be pretty confident that what we have matches the original. Well, there's some other documents, like Caesar. You've heard of Caesar, Julius Caesar. He wrote some stuff, and we have even more. We have 10 copies, 10 manuscripts of his writings. So I have my 10 pinto beans here. And again, I've never heard anybody argue that we can't be sure what Caesar really wrote. So apparently 10 is enough. And it was about 1,000 years, about 900 to 1,000 years, between the time Caesar wrote what he wrote and the earliest copy of the manuscript. So again, 10 copies, 1,000 years later, is apparently enough to be sure that, reasonably sure that what we have matches the original. I have a couple more here. This is 49 beans. That's a lot. And that is for Aristotle. He was another Greek philosopher, kind of like Plato. In fact, he was a student of Plato. And the oldest one is about 1,400 years after he wrote. So 1,400 years, 49 copies. And that's really pretty impressive. Let me slide this over here. Now I have one more that's really impressive. This is Homer, who's believed to have written a big poem called the Iliad. We have 649 copies of that manuscript, ancient copies. So let me get about 649 of these out here. That should be about 600. And we'll call that 649. It's not exact, but it's enough to give you the idea. Now that is a lot of copies. And even more impressive is the amount of time. It's only 500 years between the time it was written and the time we have the oldest copy. And that is pretty impressive. So the Iliad, written by Homer, at least believed to be written by Homer, we can really trust because we have, 649 copies, only 500 years. And another thing you can do when you have a lot of copies, you can compare them and see how close they are to each other and to see how much difference there is. And 95% of the time, all the manuscripts have the same words. So 95 times out of 100, we can say we're pretty much absolutely certain what was written down in the original. Only 5% of the time do we have any question. So that leaves the New Testament. So the question is, how does the New Testament stack up? Because if people will trust something that has 7 copies or 10 copies, if the Bible had even 7 or 10, we should be able to trust it. But the New Testament has more than that, and it would be nice if it had 650, and the truth is, we do. So let me get out some beans to show you how many copies. This is just of the New Testament. How many Greek copies we have of the New Testament. We have a lot more than 649. In fact, let me just fact, we have more than 1,000. We have more than 2,000. We actually have more than 5,000 Greek copies of the New Testament. About 5,600 have been discovered. And that's quite a pile of beans. We have 5,600. Well, over here this was Plato, they only had 7. Another important thing was how much time passed between when it was written and the earliest copy. The best we have of these other documents is the Iliad, which was about 500 years. With the New Testament, the oldest fragment we have is within 30 years of when it was originally written. In fact, within 100 to 150 years, we have a lot of documents, quite a few. But we have the oldest, less than 30 years have passed. And I talked about how we can know how reliable they are by how similar they are. Like with Homer's Iliad, we were 95% sure, 95% of the words we were sure what the original was. In the Bible, because we have so many copies and they are so close to matching each other, we are actually 99.5% of the time we're sure that the word we have in the Bible matches the original. So 99.5% of the words in the New Testament, we can say we're absolutely certain we know what the original was, or as certain as you can be through scholarship. And in the cases where there are differences, usually it's just a matter of some words being flipped around or different spellings. At no point in that 0.5% where there's some question is there any important theological lesson involved. So you see, it is perfectly reasonable to trust the Bible. And in fact, if you trust any ancient document, then it would be pretty irrational to reject the Bible. Well, that's my idea as far as I said, it's not well formed yet. At the moment, there's no magic. Maybe there won't be, maybe there will be. But just a way to visually show the amazing amount of support we have for the New Testament. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is just Greek. This is just Greek manuscripts. If we threw in early manuscripts that are translated into other languages, like Aramaic, I would need another 19,000 beans. That's another 15 pounds of beans would be required for the early manuscripts in other languages. So the support behind the Bible really is amazing. So if you want to do this, you obviously don't have to use pinto beans. They're what I pick, so I pick candy, I'd eat it all, and if I want to pick something that wouldn't go bad. So if you want to use my measurements, a quarter cup came out to 128 beans on average, which means a 4-pound bag of pinto beans is, 5,120 beans. So I have about 5 pounds here because I want to get around 5,600. And the rest you can just figure out if a quarter cup is 120. And the statistics I gave you about various ancient documents are all pretty much readily available on the internet. But I'll stick a blog post on my site with the information just to have it handy if you don't want to write stuff down from the video. But as I said, it's just an idea, and I hope you can use it. Thank you.